Iraq was governed under a British mandate until 1932, when it became independent. Before granting independence to Iraq, the British signed the 1930 Anglo-Iraqi Treaty to maintain military cooperation. With this treaty, the British Army gained the right to establish bases within Iraqi territory and move freely without restriction. Of course, the treaty also included a clause regarding British control over Iraqi oil. Although the Iraqi people were deeply disturbed by this agreement, King Faisal I had to endure it for the sake of independence. However, after his death in 1933, Ghazi bin Faisal, who ascended the throne, did not share his father's views. Despite becoming king of Iraq at the age of 21, Ghazi did not hesitate to make radical decisions and took action against the British in his country. By 1937, he had closed almost all British bases in Iraq. He only allowed the bases in the city of Basra and the Habbaniyah base near Fallujah to remain open. King Ghazi, who frequently expressed his Arab nationalist stance, had also established good relations with Nazi Germany, which was rising in Europe. However, this situation must have disturbed the British, as the young king died in a suspicious traffic accident in 1939. Following his death, Faisal II, who was only 4 years old, was placed on the Iraqi throne. Due to the young age of the new king, the control of the country was given to Prince Abdullah, who served as regent. With the outbreak of World War II in September 1939, Prince Abdullah, who was pro-British, completely severed diplomatic relations with Nazi Germany. According to Article 4 of the Anglo-Iraqi Treaty, Iraq had pledged to join the war alongside the British in the event of a possible conflict. However, Prime Minister Nouri al-Said did not declare war on Germany and instead limited his actions to expelling German officials from Iraq. He also announced that they would remain neutral in the war and that the Iraqi armed forces would not be deployed outside Iraq. While his stance was met with criticism by the British, he was forced to resign from his position in February 1940. In March 1940, Rashid Ali al-Gaylani became the Prime Minister of Iraq, who was anti-British and supported taking a stance against Britain in the war. Although he was not openly pro-Axis, he wanted to join the war on Germany's side depending on how the war progressed. Prince Abdullah, on the other hand, favored close relations with the Allies, especially Britain. In June 1940, when Fascist Italy joined the war on Germany's side, the Iraqi government did not sever diplomatic relations with Italy. In September 1940, it was decided that British troops in India would pass through Iraqi territory and be transported to Europe via Syria by sea. Although Britain applied to the Iraqi government for this, Prime Minister Gaylani did not allow British troops to pass through Iraq. After this incident, he secretly established contacts with Nazi representatives in Ankara and Berlin and began cooperating with the Germans. Shortly afterward, the Italian embassy in Baghdad became the main center of Axis propaganda and anti-British protests, and the capital Baghdad even turned into the center of Nazi operations in the Middle East. Although Prince Abdullah was deeply disturbed by this situation, he was unable to assert authority over the Nazi-supported Gaylani. In October, the British government imposed severe economic sanctions on Iraq, which was openly aiding the Nazis. While this situation caused a crisis in the Iraqi economy, the public gradually began to grow restless. Meanwhile, news of British victories against Italian forces in North Africa significantly weakened the support for Prime Minister Gaylani. On January 31, 1941, under intense pressure from Prince Abdullah, Gaylani was forced to resign from the prime ministership. Talha al-Hashimi, who was pro-British, was appointed as the new Prime Minister of Iraq by Prince Abdullah. However, Gaylani had no intention of giving up. After his resignation, he held secret meetings with Nazi officers and decided to carry out a coup against Prince Abdullah. Of course, for this he needed the support of the Iraqi army. Contacting 4 colonels who were members of the Nazi-supported organization known as the Golden Square, Gaylani asked for their support for the coup. As the colonels commanding 4 major army units near Baghdad immediately began preparations for the coup, Prince Abdullah, having learned of the plot, fled Baghdad on the night of March 31st. He first took refuge at the British base in Habbaniyah and was later placed on the warship Cockchafer stationed in the Persian Gulf. On the morning of April 1st, the Iraqi army, led by Salah al-Sabag, took action and surrounded the capital, Baghdad. Realizing that he could not resist the coup, Iraqi Prime Minister Taha al-Hashimi fled to British-controlled Jordan along with members of the government. Following this event, which went down in Iraqi history as the Golden Square Coup, the National Defense Government was established on April 3rd, and Gaylani was appointed as its prime minister. Ali Gaylani decided to maintain the monarchy and appointed Sharif bin Raja as the new regent of King Faisal II. Afterward, all pro-British politicians in the country and citizens who were sympathetic to the British were arrested one by one. In his statement, Gaylani declared that no further concessions would be made to Britain, that diplomatic ties with Italy and Germany would be maintained, and that all British troops in the country would be expelled. During this period, believing that Britain was weak due to the Germans establishing full dominance over Europe, Gaylani thought he could negotiate with them. However, things did not go as he expected. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill sent a very harsh letter to Gaylani, demanding that he immediately end his anti-British stance, otherwise British forces would enter Iraq. After this shocking letter, on April 7th, Gaylani sent word to the Nazis, requesting military assistance from Germany in the event of a possible war with Britain. Following this tension, the British cancelled the aid they had been providing to the Iraqi Army, Navy, and Air Force. The British force of approximately 4,000 men stationed at the Habbaniyah base under the command of Major General Waterhouse was put on a war footing. Fearing a possible attack by British bases against the Iraqi army, Gaylani deployed a division of 10,000 troops from Kirkuk and Baghdad around the Habbaniyah base. The British had 116 warplanes at the Habbaniyah base, 90 of which were ready for action. The Iraqi Air Force, on the other hand, had nearly 70 operational fighter and bomber aircraft at its bases in Baghdad and Mosul. While 3 British armored warships were deployed to the Persian Gulf, 2 Iraqi naval vessels were stationed in the Shatt al-Arab waterway near the city of Basra. When it comes to the British base in Basra, there were approximately 1,000 British personnel stationed there. However, most of them were personnel referred to as support staff. On April 8, Prime Minister Winston Churchill contacted the Viceroy of India, Lord Linlithgow, to ask whether reinforcements could be sent to Iraq. The Viceroy stated that within 5 days, he could send a force of 5,000 men to Basra by sea and 1,500 men to Habbaniyah by air. On April 10th, Major General William Fraser, who was appointed to command in Iraq, set out for Basra to ensure the safe landing of reinforcements from India and to establish a temporary base in the region. On April 12th, the naval convoy consisting of 8 ships carrying reinforcements departed from Karachi. After a 3-day journey, the convoy was welcomed on the morning of April 15th by the British Navy stationed in Basra. As British naval ships accumulated in Basra, Gaylani sent 5,000 Iraqi soldiers to the Basra coastline. On the same day, the British Navy moved toward the Shatt al-Arab and reached the Basra coast around 10 o'clock. Major General Fraser sent word to Prime Minister Gaylani stating that his forces would pass through Iraq to Palestine and that they had no intention of occupying Iraqi territory. Believing this statement, Gaylani did not object to British troops landing. By April 20th, the British forces had completed the landing and began establishing a temporary base on the Basra coast. Meanwhile, reinforcement forces consisting of 13 ships departing from Bombay reached Basra on April 30th, raising the number of British troops in Basra to over 20,000. After being informed of the British mobilization, Prime Minister Gaylani ordered the Iraqi army to take action. At 3 o'clock on the night of May 1st, 14,000 Iraqi soldiers departing from Baghdad began advancing toward the Habbaniyah base. Upon learning of the situation, British aircraft in Habbaniyah began patrol flights around the base. Around 7 o'clock, Iraqi forces positioned themselves on a hill south of the base, with anti-aircraft guns, anti-tank weapons, and many artillery batteries aimed at the Habbaniyah base. Base Commander George Smart sent a message to the Iraqi army asking the reason for the mobilization, to which the Iraqi side responded that the hill was surrounded for training purposes. Of course, General Smart did not quite believe this response and ordered all aircraft at the base to be on standby. Meanwhile, reinforcements to Iraqi forces continued, and the number of troops on the hill approached 20,000. After a tense night, at 5 o'clock on the morning of May 2nd, British aircraft took off and began bombing Iraqi positions. While the Iraqi army responded with anti-aircraft fire, Iraqi Air Force planes carried out hit-and-run raids on the camp. Although Iraqi ground forces launched attacks on the camp, British forces repelled these assaults. The British air assault lasted approximately 14 hours on the first day, and by the end of the day, 22 aircraft were out of service, while 10 pilots were either killed or captured wounded. On May 3rd, continuing air attacks allowed British aircraft to disable Iraqi artillery around the base. Subsequently, the aircraft targeted Iraqi air bases to eliminate the Iraqi Air Force. The first airstrike was carried out on Baghdad Air Base, destroying 29 aircraft and rendering the runway unusable. Another strike on Baquba Air Base in Baghdad destroyed 14 aircraft and disabled the runway. On May 4th, intense clashes occurred between Iraqi and British forces around the Habbaniyah base, resulting in the loss of nearly 2,000 Iraqi soldiers and about 200 British soldiers by the end of the day. Along with heavy casualties and fear of incoming British reinforcements, morale among Iraqi forces collapsed. Although Prime Minister Gaylani called for jihad against the British, this call received no response. On May 5th, a British force of 20,000 troops in Palestine was dispatched toward Habbaniyah as reinforcement. Upon learning this, Iraqi forces around Habbaniyah began retreating toward Baghdad on May 6th. 40 British aircraft taking off from Habbaniyah carried out an airstrike near Fallujah on the retreating Iraqi army, killing nearly 1,000 Iraqi soldiers and destroying 70 armored vehicles. 13 Iraqi aircraft taking off from Mosul attempted a retaliatory strike on Habbaniyah but failed to inflict significant damage and lost 5 aircraft. On the evening of May 6th, Prime Minister Gaylani sent a message to Hitler requesting assistance from the German army. Adolf Hitler ordered 30 Luftwaffe aircraft to be sent to Iraq under the command of General Werner Junk. The German aircraft under General Junk arrived in Mosul on May 10th and launched attacks on British forces in Basra and Habbaniyah the same day. However, from the very first day, the British managed to shoot down 5 German aircraft. In the following days, heavy aerial clashes between British and German aircraft resulted in significant losses on both sides. By May 17th, only 11 of the 30 German aircraft remained operational, while 74 of the 116 British aircraft were still functional. During the same period, only 17 out of 70 Iraqi Air Force aircraft remained operational. On the evening of May 17th, the long-awaited British reinforcements of 20,000 troops finally began arriving at the Habbaniyah base. After securing the base, a force of 15,000 British troops advanced toward Fallujah. A force of 5,000 Iraqi troops took defensive positions at the entrance of Fallujah, while another 2,000 troops were positioned on the side facing Baghdad. As British forces reached Fallujah on the night of May 17th, intense fighting broke out between the two sides. In the clashes that lasted until May 22nd, 3,000 Iraqi soldiers were killed, the rest retreated, and Fallujah was captured by the British. Now, the next target for the British was the capital, Baghdad. After waiting for one day, the advance toward Baghdad began on May 23rd. Realizing that the British would inevitably capture Baghdad, Prime Minister Gaylani resigned and fled to Iran on May 29th, and then to Germany. British forces reached Baghdad on the morning of May 31st and easily captured the capital. On June 1, 1941, Prince Abdullah returned to Iraq and established a pro-British government, while British forces effectively maintained control over the country until the end of World War II. After the war ended, they completely withdrew from Iraq on October 26, 1947.